This episode is sponsored by Card Kingdom. Go to cardkingdom.com/studies to pick up all your favorite spooky magic cards. From skeletons to ghosts to mummified zombies and rabid werewolves, Magic's menagerie of monsters is overflowing with terrors. Complete your order with a bundle of haunted full art lands and whatever else your decrepit heart desires. Maybe it's a foil copy of Old Stick Fingers to lead your next commander deck. Whatever your Magic needs, Card Kingdom provides high quality products and responsive customer service, and will ship your entire order all in one package. There are skeletons within us. This disturbed the localization team tasked with importing magic to China in 1998. Carl Critchlow painted 3 unworthy dead, hunched and lurking through the moonlit fog. To pass regulations imposed by the former Ministry of Culture, the soldiers were reskinned. Someone stuffed their hollow frames with muscles and ligaments and flesh, pigment reanimation. In the cover-up painting, they left the spine protruding, a palimpsest of bones. There are skeletons within us. This intrigued the caretakers of a church at the center of Milan. When a nearby cemetery ran out of room, a chamber was constructed to house the overflow of bodies. For 500 years, piles of human remains sat stowed away in the dark. In these former people, a sculptor saw opportunity. Before succumbing to bubonic plague, he sent a vault into the sky and gave the empty ceiling to a master painter. Along the walls supporting this gentle glimpse of heaven, the sculptor arranged thousands and thousands of bones. Skulls formed into crosses were reinforced with femurs of criminals and victims of the epidemic that ravaged the city. Centuries later, Ralph Horsley paints hundreds of rats emerging from the sockets of decaying crania. Their eyes glow red. The careful arrangement of the bones along the walls resembles the interior of the church in Milan, and the Skull Chapel in Poland, and many other ossuaries scattered throughout Europe. Somewhere, beneath the endless city of Ravnica, a similar place exists. There stretches a vast tunnel of decorative death, labyrinths like those beneath Paris. The fantasy card game continues to pull from our reality. Art and life remain intertwined. There are skeletons within us. Amy Weber shows 3 figures, half alive. The clock strikes 12:35. The skeletons are walking back to their origin to reverse the onset of time. Later, the 3 appear again. They seem perpetually at war with the pendulum. It is so hard to go backwards. Somewhere, a grandfather clock strikes 13. The ghost of Edvard Munch haunts Weber's painting, perhaps an unintentional citation. Munch lived in death. Among his many self-portraits was a lithograph from 1895, where a pale head hovers above a dismembered skeletal arm. 2 years prior, he painted death at the helm of a lonely rowboat, a sight serene. For Munch and his contemporaries, the skeleton was a surrogate for mortality. In high fantasy, they have occupied a somewhat different role. From their first appearance in the Dungeons & Dragons Monsters and Treasure Manual, skeletons have served as low-level foot soldiers enslaved to those who control them with magic. There is never any morale check for these monsters, notes the guide. They will always attack until totally wiped out. This relentlessness, this undying will to fight until completely disassembled, has become the skeleton's defining feature, one that reflects the logic of role-playing games. These games have trained their players to remain ever leery of wandering bones, upright or otherwise. Magic captured this paranoia in Alpha with the quintessential model. The drudge skeletons are weak but resilient. They regenerate. Their flavor text tells the terrifying short story of their horrible persistence. Bones scattered around us joined to form misshapen bodies. We struck at them repeatedly. They fell but soon formed again, with the same mocking look on their faceless skulls. 6th edition was imported to China, and in translation, the set broke a fundamental rule of magic. The censored painting of unworthy dead was reused but misplaced, resulting in 2 mechanically identical cards to share the same illustration, but with different names. The artist credit was attributed to Ian Miller, but it's not a stylistic match. Carl Critchlow confirmed to me that he had nothing to do with the redacted version. So who did this painting? Other cards censored to clear Chinese protocol produced eerie visions and new interpretations. Raised Dead ditched its bones in place of a figure more possessed. Fire Ants focused on the nominal subject in close-up. Urborg Skeleton transformed into a Phyrexian zombie, and Charcoal Diamond returned back to the land of the living. As did Decompose, to unnerving results. In the simplified Chinese version, the coffin casts a darker shadow to cover up the naked hands. The fabric is restored above the ribcage. 2 eyes glare from a lifeless skull. This is a body recomposing. There are skeletons within us, and they love to dance. To cope with the misery of the Black Death, skeletons took on a satirical slant in Western art. Recurring annihilation forced the European continent into a submissive hysteria, a total acceptance of death. This release took form in paintings and plays and sermons and songs, allegories of skeletons and the Danse Macabre. A replica fresco in Slovenia alternates between the agony of the living and the elation of the dead, all the way down the line. The same skull repeats 12 times, and on each, a certain jovial grin. Magic invited its dead to dance for the first time in Ice Age. Randy Gallegos' image is dynamic, the movements flowing and figurative. The Black Hood connotes a different personification of death, one with its own lineage and mythology. In contrast, Melissa Benson's Undead Trio from the same set approximates the physical humor of the Danse Macabre tradition. Magic took itself very seriously in the early years. Skeletons laugh in the face of this attitude. Skeletons are Halloween clowns. They thrive at the intersection of comedy and horror. These guys are having a blast.
What is a skeleton's favorite snack? Reds! Spare reds! Fuck!
Skeletons are pantomime. In contemporary pop culture, they have become vehicles of slapstick expression. Onto their fully posable parts, bereft of defining features, we impose ourselves. We tell jokes with them and through them. The 12-foot human skeleton from Home Depot was instantly embraced because it is a universal gag that transcends language. There is no context in which this prop does not become the punchline. Nothing about the 12-foot human skeleton from Home Depot is to be taken seriously. This is not a reminder of our mortality. This is not Munch. This is the mascot of ironic detachment. This is the theater of the absurd. It took about 15 years for Magic to lean into the lighthearted for the skeleton subtype. Even then, Cinderbones was a bit of a stretch. Like old stick fingers, the card name does all the heavy lifting. This is true for similar skellies like Gutterbones and Clattering Augur and Grim Roustabout. It is not their illustrations or mechanics that make them funny, but their title lines. Tenacious Dead is not the greatest card name of a skeleton in Magic. No, it is only a tribute. We'd have to sidestep to Greg Staples' work on Diabolic Tutor to find a laugh, however misplaced. The dark and brooding flavor of the card clashes with the image of a skeleton whispering dreadful nothings into the ear of an ambitious spellcaster. Of course, the act of whispering must be mimed, given the lack of lips and vocal cords to do so. When Mark Winters quoted this composition in Kaladesh, the card made more literal sense, but lost the goofy charm that the skeleton provided. Again, this painting was made in earnest, but it has since been repurposed as a template for memes. Arnold Bachlin's self-portrait with Death playing the violin has suffered a similar fate in the age of the apathetic internet. The whimsiest of all of Magic's skeletons is Tiny Bones, Trinket Thief. As a sort of antithesis to the 12-foot human skeleton from Home Depot, Tiny Bones won the hearts of fans all over for being so small. Tiny Bones is cute in the same way Gizmo from Gremlins is cute. They are both miniature and defanged exceptions to the rule. The Secret Lair version of this card shows Tiny Bones riding a scooter and speaking some form of maniacal bonish. Nearly all of Ryan Quickfall's cards for this drop feature skeletons performing daredevil acrobatics. Alternate out-of-universe treatments of cards seems to be the best place to put wacky skeletons of this nature. In general, Magic continues to take itself very seriously, and has yet to fully embrace the intrinsic morbid humor of skeletons in standard sets. Furthermore, the subtype is still bound conceptually and mechanically to the D&D archetype. To build a functioning skeleton deck is difficult because of this lack of range and support, especially in colors outside of black. At a base level, the creatures are extremely narrow and low performing, even in limited Magic. The best skeletons are often carried by their other subtypes. Dragons, wizards, knights, and trolls make up the marquee cards. Over the years, the skeleton's closely related cousin Zombie has received far more love and attention by play design. Nevertheless, skeletons remain attractive subjects and powerful narrative devices for artists in Magic. Consider Anaba Ancestor. Veterans of the game will recognize the visual callback to Herloon Minotaur, the face of early Magic. This painting communicates an implicit sadness, an acknowledgement that time has passed in the world, and with it its inhabitants. Contamination and desolation and winds of wrath all suggest a similar decay. For a while, skeletons became a recurring motif in red burn spells to illustrate their intensity. This card is perhaps the most flavorful and resonant of the bunch, as a skeleton token is actually created as a byproduct. In reanimating effects like Grave Exchange and Animate Dead, we find the trope of creatures returning to life. Necromancy is synonymous with skeletons in high fantasy. Magic benefits greatly from its graveyard being a physical space on the table. Unlike abstract zones such as the hand and the stack, the graveyard is a tangible place where creatures go when they die. From there, players can initiate unholy rebirth, and skeletons help visualize that idea in illustrations. Finally, skeletons have been used to symbolic effect in Magic art. Adam Rex's masterpiece on Terror showcases a body being reduced to its primary physical parts: skin, muscle, bone. This painting is a twisted take on the Danse Macabre, a reminder that the skeleton within us is buried beneath layers of organic mess. Eric Deschamps' work on Skeletal Grimace creates a similar unease. This piece toes the line between loony and lurid. On one hand, the expression is exaggerated to the point of burlesque, like Jim Carrey in The Mask. Upon closer examination, the skin is being stretched to its limits. The eyes and lips and tongue are still intact. This isn't a man wearing a skull for a mask. This is a violent removal of the mask that is his face. This outrageous painting exemplifies the duality of skeletons. Skeletons are benign and playful in art, but uncanny in the world. They are dancing puppets and undead automata. They frighten and they jest. Harryhausen understood this dichotomy. His skeletons went from madcap to foreboding in a single scene. Their on-screen stunts provided comedic relief, but these warriors were nonetheless lethal in their skirmishes. A simulation of 50 skeleton archers drawing bows against Elden Ring's major bosses plays at this same idea. Skeletons are weak in isolation, but formidable in numbers. They are silly until they are not. This is a painting by Hans Holbein the Younger called The Ambassadors from 1533. It is a double portrait of two men standing in front of a shelf, upon which sits a still life of myriad items rendered in remarkably high detail. In the foreground, floating above the intricate tile work on the floor, there is a strange blur stretching from left to right. When viewed at the appropriate angle, the anamorphic object reveals itself as a human skull. Much speculation surrounds this image, but many believe Holbein hid the skull in this painting to remind viewers that they will die. Magic has never been so overt with its messaging. After all, this is a card game, an entertainment product meant to distract from the terrors of the world. In most cases, illustrations serve a pragmatic purpose. They are often nothing more than an extension of the rules and flavor text surrounding them. However, for those who look close enough, for those who consider human histories and traditions, patterns begin to emerge. Painters mimic, images resurface, art perpetuates and repeats. A lineage of bones connects the past to the present. To those who are listening, the paintings whisper, "There are skeletons within us."